Well, hello there YouTube. Typically I don't make repair videos, but today I'm going to take y'all in and show y'all how I'm going to replace the radiator on a 2006 Lexus RX400h. This could also apply to the RX330 as they are technically very similar because they share the same 3.3 liter V6. So I would imagine a lot of this radiator stuff might transition over to that one as well. So I'll go ahead and put that in the title. But let's go ahead and get into it and see how simple it is to remove one of these radiators and put a new one in. Let's go. I went ahead and grabbed some basic tools out of the garage. Kept it pretty simple with a large flathead, a Phillips head screwdriver, as well as some pliers and a set of deep sockets. Well, for starters, let's go ahead and take my dad's screwdriver here, and we will gently take out these covers. Simply lift up on it, and we'll move these off to the side, making sure that we put our tabs back into the holes so we don't lose them. And better yet, just keep them right there next to each other so they don't have anywhere to roll. Now you can see our radiator cap is exposed, and it appears that we are a little on the low side as the radiator is leaking. That's why we are replacing it. Let me show you the leaks. You can see that crack right there, that very small hairline crack. And there's a bit of discoloration in the plastic. Let me see if I can zoom in here. See that little bit of kind of a yellowish green tan color around the edge of that crack. And that's where our engine coolant has been seeping out of. Earlier that was a little bit more visibly wet, and you could see that the plastic housing on the radiator has been compromised. Definitely need to replace this radiator and just start fresh. Generally, the coolant reservoir is going to be separate from the actual cooling fans, but in this particular case, you have the cooling fan assembly and the radiator reservoir, or coolant reservoir, mounted to the fans, which makes it kind of an interesting design. We're going to go ahead and take off our intake here. So we're going to go ahead and just pull off these covers and get the top of the radiator exposed. Okay, we took that plastic cover right off of the top of the frame and exposed the two, let's see, these are 10 millimeter. We got 10 millimeter bolts, fairly short, one on each side of this, and I guess this would be kind of like a little air scoop. This is the air scoop that goes into our air intake box where our air filter is located. And I'm just going to go ahead and loosen this up and take it off just a piece. Set this off to the side, and we went ahead and took our 10 millimeter bolts and we just put them right back in where we had unscrewed them from. That way we don't end up dropping those or losing those anywhere down on this stuff. Next step, I'm just working with what I see. There's a overflow hose attached to the cap assembly on the I guess this would be the driver's side of the car. Go ahead and just pop this hose out. Still not done 100% with the covers. Going to grab the Phillips head and get these two little plastic caps removed. And this is just a little cover we can lift up, and it'll help us get better access to this coolant, this main coolant hose coming off the engine block to the top side of the radiator. Next, we're going to use our jack stand, and we're going to go ahead and lift up on it a little so we can get up underneath. Hose right in front of the engine, the cradle, the K-member, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to lift that up a little bit so I can get a little extra clearance. Getting underneath here, we're pointing towards the front passenger side of the car, and if you look carefully up towards right there, you can see that white little cap. That is our drain line for the radiator. We're going to go ahead and unscrew that counterclockwise, and I'm going to use what I've made is just this right here. Well, get out of the way, you're in my way. This is like I was saying, folks, I got a little piece of old water hose that's only about 12 inches long. I went ahead and cut that, and yeah, So we're gonna see if we can just hook it up and drain that. Man, this came at a hot time of year. It is about 102 degrees out here right now. So I jammed that 12 inches of water hose, and I know it's a bit challenging to see, but I stuck it up right underneath that nozzle. And right now we're just collecting the engine coolant. That way it doesn't leak out on the ground. And when we keep it clean inside these gallon jugs, we're able to reuse it and repurpose it. So it works out. Next, while the coolant is draining, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the wiring harness for the cooling fans. These are pretty simple, as you simply just push down on that tab. This one I can show you a little bit closer. Right there, we're going to just squeeze that tab, pinch it as hard as you can. Sometimes when you're taking them off, you kind of have to push them forward and then kind of go back and forth while pushing that tab, and it'll come loose and you'll have your electrical connection off. Then you can see the wiring harness ties in, has these little hooks that it kind of ties into, and right here it's popped in, usually right there. You can see that. So I'm just loosening up these connections. Get those out of the way. And while we're up here, we'll go ahead and take these 10mm bolts off. These are holding the radiator cooling fans. So let's get those up and out. Now you can see our cooling fan assembly is loose, and now I'm just going to go ahead and grab some wire cutters, and I'm going to snip this little zip tie that's holding this coolant reservoir hose. And seeing as how we're going to replace this radiator, I don't know, we may or may not keep the original cap. I think it's best to use whatever cap comes with the radiator, but this is the original OEM radiator from Japan on this Lexus RX. So also, since the coolant has drained, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and get the big pliers on this guy. All right, got that guy off to the side. Now we can slowly twist that left to right. God knows how long it's been on there, so it might take a little bit of twisting. Might even have to get a little, sometimes you have to kind of peel on them a bit. It's like you gotta massage the rubber. You gotta massage the rubber and get it off of there. And we'll just twist, maybe some WD-40. We'll spray some WD-40 up underneath there, it'll come right off. What I tell you, I just stuck a little bit of WD-40 in there, right off. Came right. And can't forget this little zip tie here. Don't want to cut any of the rubber line, so I'm just going to carefully get in on that. There we go. Perfect. And this one is twisting off a lot easier than that big one, so. And for our parts, we went ahead and AutoZone was the only place that could come through within a few hours notice. These radiators are kind of a challenge to get because they're not commonly requested. And as always, you buy a radiator at AutoZone and you have to buy a separate radiator cap. Duralast does not come with a radiator cap when you buy one of their radiators, which is kind of silly. Thanks, Duralast. I don't know. I feel like you could add one without having to make it a separate ordeal. Just saying. So we just went ahead and sat down our cooling fan assembly over here, and after removing those 10mm bolts, and I had actually done some work on the cooling fans. I had actually replaced the cooling fan assembly on this car prior to doing what I'm doing now. And the unit that I had received from Amazon, the cooling fan assembly unit from Amazon with the new coolant reservoir mounted to it and everything, it didn't allow me to use the original mounting locations for the bottom bolts. So those just kind of, you know, they were really just hanging there technically, but still worked. So next, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the big pliers and I'm gonna loosen up the clamp on that lower main radiator hose and see if I can grab what leftover WD-40 that I do have, and I'll go ahead and break that loose. Whew, it's getting hot. So at this point, it was too difficult to get down there with the pliers and perfectly grab up on that big hose connection right there. So I just went ahead and followed it up here to the engine block where I could easily loosen this one and pull it from the engine block. So now our attention is turned toward the top frame, rail cover, whatever this assembly is, that is essentially holding our radiator in place. You can see the top side rubber grommets on the radiator, and this guy is going to need to come off. Okay, so we took out these two from one here. Then we have this little guy. He was right here holding the main hood latch assembly, and there was also a little follow-up bolt there, which is right here. These two guys, I want to say they were right here, and then we have these over here. These went in there and right there. So after lifting up that top panel, we pulled it down. We've got our little plastic hooks that hold it in here. Typically, I don't know that many radiators I've done where they've had an electrical connection that had to run over the top of it. So you can see they even put them in these little channel protectors. But yeah, those were, I guess, just sitting right up on top there. So watch out for those. Okay, next is this retaining plate that runs along the top here. I want to emphasize we have our little triangular cover here, and then we have those electrical connections for each horn. It's interesting, but they're there. And when we drop this back down in, it's going to go all the way down, I guess only down to here, and the rest will hold in once we get those lined up in the right spots. Okay, so now we have the bolts removed. There was the little teeny ones here that we took out, and then we had these two big fatties on the end. So now this should just lift right up gently, if I'm not mistaken. I'm going to use two hands, so I'm going to put the camera down momentarily. And so I don't scratch up the front end on my father-in-law's RX. Okay, well, so the one tricky part that doesn't make sense is that in order to get the radiator out, we have to cut a 3/4 inch hole, almost an inch in diameter. We need to cut a hole here so we can gain access to that one last big bolt that's holding in. Those are the retaining bolts. So I went ahead and used this marker, and I just marked, you know, a little circle to indicate right there is where we're going to. It's actually 2 sheets of metal in there, so this kind of sucks. Lexus kind of messed up when they put these. They didn't even need them, really. They could have just done without them, but that's what I'm going to focus on doing now, is drilling those out. All right, having to get creative to stay out of the sun. Camp Longshore. Let's get back underneath here. All right, let's stay in our little shade. Don't want to get burned. So, as you guys can see, we finally made it through to the other side, and now we can access that bolt that's right up in there. That bolt head is straight through. We've got our extension on our 12mm, and you guys can see, there we go. finally got to it. It's working now. As you guys can see there, I'm now directly in line with that bolt, that bottom retaining bolt. It's the last one to my understanding, and the radiator should come up and out, and then we can start switching everything over. All right, reporting back. Camp Longshore, 1100 hours. Since we got those two bolts taken out at the bottom, the radiator separates from the bracket assembly. It did catch a little bit, so keep in mind that these rubber hoses make it a little difficult when you're pulling out the radiator. So you do have to kind of push these and move them around a little. And then it also is going to snag as well here on the high pressure side for your AC system. This little area got snagged, so I had to be careful and kind of gently move that. But let's go take a look at the radiators. All right, so we got the new one in the box, and here we have the old one. And right there you can see where it was leaking. It was leaking out right there. I just laid it flat on its face and it had a little bit of coolant left, I guess. But you could see where it was leaking right out of that crack. Sure enough. And as far as our replacement radiator, this is from Duralast, part number B2929. Also here shows their AZPO number. Looks like for packaging they just have a couple of bagged pieces of foam. So we'll go ahead and pull those out. Try not to make a mess of them. And boom, we have our radiator out. Brand spanking new. I hope this thing works flawless. If it doesn't, my father-in-law can have my car and I'll fix it tomorrow. Okie dokie. So, new radiator dropped in nicely. The original radiator had a lot of foam and padding on the side, which I guess, you know, help keep it nice and cushioned. This one I'm just gonna stuff it in there, and already got the main cooling hose up top, and also I got that hose transferred over on the bottom, and we got it connected here as well. I can tell that my father-in-law has been using tap water in his cooling system for a while, because there's all kinds of white calcium powder just inside these hoses. Keep in mind, folks, in today's vehicles you don't want to put regular tap water in them. At this point we're basically going to have to go in the reverse process, so refer back to the video earlier if you're curious about anything in regards to reassembling. I'm not going to bother wasting time trying to show y'all which bolts that I already showed y'all that I took out on the way. So let's go ahead and move towards the end. All right, we'll put it on YouTube and hopefully it can help somebody else. Mucho trabajar.
It's excellent, Sonic.
It was a lot of work. So the new radiator is installed, and we filled up our reservoir tank here, and then we also slowly filled up the main radiator. And as I was doing that, I was reaching down and grabbing onto the hoses. Las mangueras, muy importantes. These are nice and hot. These have inflated. These are swelling up and they're getting nice and hot like they're supposed to. So the cooling hoses, the coolant's in the hoses and it's filled up. So I burped the system with the funnel, where I had used the funnel and just slowly filled it up until all of the little air bubbles came out of the top. But still, it's important for us to drive it around like we're doing, driving it around the neighborhood and just making sure that we keep an eye on it and listen for any issues. But all in all, sounds good for now. We're going to go ahead and keep driving it, and hopefully we are done for this job.
We hope this video helped you in some way. Please check out our other videos for some useful content. Bye-bye.